pandemya. Matapang ang Pilipino, matapang tayo, kakayanin natin to, kaya natin to. Like Andres Bonifacio, he is our hero. Hindi atakbo, hindi atakbo. Nandyan na ang bakuna. Magpapaturok ka ba? Supilit na ang pandemya. Magpapaturok ka ba? Huwag mawalan ng pag-asa. May pag-asa. Malapit na ang ginhawa. May ginhawa. Mawawala ang pandemya. Mawawala na rin yan. It's gonna be okay na. Okay na, okay na, okay na. Nandyan na ang bakuna. Magpapaturok ka ba? Supilit na ang pandemya. Magpapaturok ka ba? Nandyan na ang bakuna. Magpapaturok ka ba? Supilit na ang pandemya. Magpapaturok ka ba?
To all RJ Digi TV viewers, you can also watch us on YouTube channel RJ Digi TV. Just go to YouTube, type RJ space Digi TV, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and get your daily dose of your favorite programs. Thank you for watching RJ Digi TV. You are watching the multi-awarded Radio Bandido TV on Channel 224 Sky Cable and TV Plus boxes. Simulcast on DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Informing, advising, and entertaining the Filipinos and OFWs around the world. Streaming live on www.facebook.com/DZRJ 8:10 a.m. or on YouTube, channel RJAM News. To all Teleradio Bandido viewers and listeners, you can now watch Teleradio Bandido on our new YouTube channel, RJAM News. Hit the subscribe button and like the video. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you get notified when a new video gets uploaded. Don't miss out on our dynamite lineup.
Pugad vloggers, ang kurap titirisin, sa loob sa bayan wawalisin, walang sasantuhin. Ang saya-saya, nakakabaliw, kasama natin ang tropa. Pugad vloggers, Pugad vloggers.
Hello, good evening mga kapugad. This is Attorney Darwin Cañete. I'll be your host tonight at Pugad Vloggers. Pasensya na kayo sa anggulo ng aking camera at kalahating mukha lang nakikita nyo, but I'll try to lean. Yeah, I'm trying to lean lower. Anyway, you can watch us at DZRJ 8:10 a.m. on Facebook. no? Na we are also, of course, broadcasting via radio, but we are also on cable channel 224. Likewise, we are on the Radio Garden app and also YouTube, no? So nandun po sa crawler kung ano yung sa like and subscribe po kayo. And tonight we are privileged. We are very, very happy to welcome our guest who is expert immigration lawyer on U.S. immigration. He has a business here in that area. You can get in touch with him at the email that he has provided with us, info@interlinepartners.com. May I welcome our guest tonight, Attorney Ryan Barshop. Hello, sir.
Thanks, Darwin. Actually, I'm a return guest. We've been on a few
Return, yes.
return guests. We had a few runs.
We had a few rounds before, yeah.
We had a few run-ins, actually.
Back in the day.
Yes. All right. Well, Darwin, it's good to be back. So
yes.
Today we're going to focus entirely mainly on policy, on what's happening. We're going to focus really on what's going to happen, what could happen, what's happening now,
yes,
and what could happen in the scope of COVID vaccines, which especially
that's an issue, no?
Yes.
Many of our countrymen probably are very, very concerned, very, very worried that due to the COVID pandemic all over, it's a global pandemic.
Well, it's a pandemic. Yeah.
Right. There will be certain adjustments in the way people travel.
Well, especially to the U.S. and how they live in the U.S. And of course, if they're employed in the U.S., there's going to be adjustments all over the place. So let's focus on the good news first. The good news.
Okay, what's the good news, Ryan?
We feel there's light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, let's look at the stats. Okay, the more people are vaccinated, the more the numbers are going down. Let's look at New York. Now, I'm from New York. I grew up in New York. My law license is in New York. My family's in New York. Okay. New York was the epicenter of the it was the hardest hit. New York got so bad in the early days of the pandemic that there was talk of the governor deploying the Army National Guard and literally sealing off the entire island of Manhattan from the outside for at least 2 weeks. It was that bad. Today, New York is literally booming back. Restaurants are opening. Citi Field, where the New York Mets play, is literally at much higher capacity. Yankee Stadium's at higher capacity. It's coming in. Broadway has announced reopening. Now, for me, Broadway is very personal because being from a theater family. So the very fact that Broadway is returning this September is remarkable. So things are getting better. They really are. The more people get vaccinated, coupled with those who are infected, you're seeing they hit the peak. And now everything is coming down. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I have a feeling we're going to have a much better Merry Christmas this year. I feel it's very possible. And there's no guarantees. It's still going to take time. It's not going to be back like it was 2019, but we're getting there. So let's hold on. But now we got to talk about some changes that are going to be in place for a while so we can keep our lives going. Okay. And that's the issue of vaccines. Now we're going to focus entirely within the scope of the U.S. We're not going to touch Philippines, and we're not going to touch politics. We're only going to focus on the U.S. part. Okay. Currently, there is well, before I get there, I'm going to focus on the immigration part. Okay. We have two type of people coming into the U.S., two different categories. Now, for the beer drinkers of the world, there's ale and Florida, right? You have two different. For the coffee drinkers of the world, there's Robusta and Arabica.
Yes.
For your wine drinkers, there's white and red or white and Merlot.
Yeah.
And for the immigration lawyers like myself, there's the immigrants and the non-immigrants.
Yes.
So, okay. So currently, right now, the current policy is that if you want to travel to the U.S., whether you're a citizen or any type of visa, you need to show a negative test taken within 72 hours. Okay. So that's the current policy. Now, that's a far cry than getting a vaccine. So let's talk about the two different categories right now. Well, first of all, could the U.S. impose a vaccine requirement? Let me go back to
that's the vaccine passport issue.
Well, yeah. So let me just talk about a few things. When the summer of 2000, I hope that anybody who was part of me in that summer, that changed my life. I went to West Africa for the summer, and then I spent time in the Middle East. I built a school in Ghana. that summer was if I could point to one moment in my life that said, I'm going to live overseas, it's that summer in 2000 in West Africa. Before I can go to West Africa, I had to get a yellow fever card. It literally was a yellow piece of paper for yellow fever. I had to get a yellow fever shot. When we arrived in Ghana at the port of entry, I had to show them my passport, show them my visa.
Ryan, don't talk too fast.
Sorry.
Slow down.
Show them my yellow fever card. Okay? That was a requirement for Ghana. You needed to show proof of yellow fever. Okay? Now the situation is, will they have the same requirement that to enter the United States or to enter other countries, will they require proof of COVID vaccination? Okay, so this, as I said, there's two types of categories, immigrant and non-immigrant. Okay. Now, for non-immigrants, we're talking about your standard visitor visas or other types of temporary visas. Okay. Right now, there is no policy that I can see on the horizon that would come straightly out of the U.S. that would mandate anybody coming in must have a vaccine. That doesn't mean when you're inside is different, but coming in. Now, for the immigrants, when you apply for an immigrant visa, you're applying for a green card. You're going permanently. Before you can get a green card, you have to go for a medical evaluation and be cleared by a panel physician that is certified by the US CDC, the Centers for Disease Control.
Yes.
Okay. There is every possibility that the CDC will require a COVID vaccine before you can be medically cleared. So that's for immigrants. I see that as a real possibility. They will require that, especially for certain countries. I definitely see that happening as a real possibility. But would they have a blanket policy that would require those to get vaccinated before they enter? And I think that is highly unlikely, and let me explain why. It would be so overreaching. In order for that to happen, you would have to either go through an executive order through the White House or through Congress. Okay, I think that any move to make that mandatory wouldn't survive judicial scrutiny. It would be shot down. It would be issued. A federal judge would issue an injunctive, prevent it from taking place. Any appeal would be dismissed at the Court of Appeals, and if the Supreme Court happened to grant cert, it would also be killed. So I think that is just not a possibility.
It can't be legislated.
Well, it could. No, it could. It could be legislated. But I'm saying is, if that happened, if there was an executive, don't forget, under Trump and now under the current White House, if they can rule through executive order, which it's almost like ruling through fiat. You can rule through you can govern through executive order. But executive orders are always subjected to scrutiny.
Yes, there would be a constitutional challenge.
Well, there would be a judicial challenge.
Judicial challenge, yes.
There would be a judicial challenge. For example, under the Obama years, there was a move for amnesty. Okay, that didn't survive. It didn't survive judicial challenge. What happens is, if there is a situation where an executive order is passed, the affected litigants can file a suit in federal court to prevent it from taking place before it even begins. So that's possible. So if there was either an executive order, or there was anything, or there was a bill passed in the House, passed in the Senate, signed by the president, or even a regulation passed by an agency such as the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, the CDC, that could also be challenged judicially. Very possible. So I see that highly, highly unlikely coming through, because it wouldn't stand judicial scrutiny. Yes. All it takes is one federal judge in any federal district court to say no. I mean, in New York State alone, you have four separate district courts. You can file in any one. California has several. So any litigant can file a case in federal court to prevent that from coming through.
Yes, but you have 50 states. If you're going to have a federal challenge, that would encompass the entire United States. Well, yes. But if it's state by state with different state legislatures, do you think that would be state to state challenge? Yeah.
Well, no. If you file a case in federal court, it's federal law. So a federal judge, let's say in New York, can rule on a case that would affect the entire country. Federal judges have that power. Because in order to challenge a federal law, you first have to file a case in federal district court.
But if it's only like the state of New York or Los Angeles, for example, who issues those kinds of rulings.
Well, we're gonna get to that next. We'll get to that.
All right.
Okay, so basically we said, look, it's highly unlikely that, at least for temporary stays in the US, that the US would come out and say, we need a vaccine right now. I don't think that's going to happen. Not to say it couldn't happen, but it's unlikely. Now, you mentioned state issues, okay? That's a very tricky situation, because do the states have the power? While this one thing that was interesting, really, really interesting about this pandemic, was that the battles between the states and the federal government. Because we have a federal system, public health is a state matter.
Correct.
The Department of Health is a state issue. It's not a federal issue. It's a state issue. So when you had states who were really having a hard time controlling the pandemic, they had to request from the federal government, we need help. We need ventilators. Can you send the U.S. naval ship Comfort? Those sorts of situations. So that's an important distinction. Now, you mentioned, could the states issue their own vaccine passports, what we call now?
Correct. Interstate travel, yeah.
Well, the states cannot restrict. What they cannot do is the states cannot say, if you don't have a vaccine, you can't come into my state. No, because that is a disruption of interstate commerce. You can have health protocols like they did previously. For example, Florida, for several months, had a policy that if you were coming from any one of these states, upon arrival, you had to quarantine for 14 days. And that was simply because the cases are up. Cases were all over the place. New York had the same policy.
Okay.
Now, almost all the states, with an exception of Guam, has said, if you're vaccinated, you don't need to quarantine.
Okay.
So when you had that state issue with quarantine, that was a state issue. New York, for example, stated that upon arrival in New York State, you had to quarantine. You had to register you had to check in with the Department of Health, and they would do checks on you. And if they found out you violated your quarantine, you were subject to a $2,000 fine.
Yes, like the incident in Hawaii. There was a visitor who went out of the hotel.
Yes.
And she was fined like $2,000.
Yes, and they can do that. Yes, because of the public health significance of the moment. But as a whole now, because that won't last forever. You can't have that forever. Yeah. So no, that has limited scope. Once cases are under control, like they are now across the country, then that has limited power. Eventually, it can't stand forever. Now, let's talk about some things about so we already talked about what could happen with the U.S. requiring immigrants to get vaccinated before they get their immigrant visas. That's a possibility. Could they require non-immigrants to show proof of a vaccine? Well, let's talk about this, and we're going to get into the states, and then we're going to talk about private enterprise. Okay.
Okay.
So right now, New York has created an app that was built, I believe, through IBM to monitor if you've been vaccinated. Okay. But then you have other states, specifically Texas, Florida, and Arizona, where their governors have already signed executive orders saying, we will not allow this type of app. We will not allow vaccine passports. And the reason is because it could lead to a runaway. So it's one thing for a state if a state comes out and says, we won't allow vaccine passports, is one thing. But if you have a state like New York that says we're going to require vaccine passports, it's going to lead to a quagmire. Because then where does it end? You're pretty much giving private enterprise the ability to discriminate, to pretty much to regulate their own commerce, to regulate. And that's dangerous, because who decides what? Could a business, for example, refuse to provide you service because you don't have a vaccine passport, because you don't have proof of a vaccine?
Yes.
I mean, the thing about a vaccine is, and it's like the federal government cannot mandate vaccines the same way they can't force sterilization. That was an issue, or that was an issue for decades.
Yes.
People who they deem were inferior.
This is eugenics, basically.
Yes, they were sterilized. Yes, they were engaging in sterilization.
If there's a mental impairment or some kind of
Well, a lobotomy was one
lobotomy,
thing.
yeah.
But that was state. Yes, you can get a judge to declare you mentally insane and therefore order a lobotomy. That was a
Yes.
possibility. So we don't abide to that anymore because that's a violation of your fundamental right. You
Yes.
have a fundamental right to your own body and what you put into that body of yours. So if you want to, so that's the reason why the federal government cannot force you to take a vaccine. Now, could your life become very difficult if you don't take the vaccine? Absolutely.
Yes.
For example, could private enterprise refuse your admission? Well, it depends on what you're coming into. For an example, I mentioned Broadway's reopening. Broadway, it's not impossible for theaters to request either show me proof of vaccination, or on the alternative, show me you've been tested negative before you can get your tickets.
Okay.
That's a possibility. Broadway can come out and do that. Okay. Can the airlines require passengers to present proof of a vaccine or proof of a negative test? Absolutely. But more specifically now, and let me tie this into both state law and immigration, is could you be terminated from your job if you refuse to take a vaccine?
Yes, that's very if you have control over your body, but there will be consequences if you refuse to comply.
Yes, and that is a real possibility. But the question is, what type of job? Is it a government job? Is it a private sector job? So let me give you let me talk about a case of why I believe that could happen. Okay, at least 15, probably closer to 20 years ago, there was a case where a company told all their employees, from now on, we're going to be a non-smoking company. If you're a smoker, we're going to give you 90 days to quit. We're going to give you 90 days to kick the habit. After 90 days, if you're still smoking, we're going to assess you on a case-by-case basis. But we're paying for your health insurance. We want you to be non-smokers. This is our policy.
Yeah, okay.
Long before smartphones, long before social media, you had an employee who was terminated for his job for smoking in his own house on a weekend. But this is what happens.
Okay.
Filed a lawsuit alleging wrongful termination.
Yeah.
The company countered. They explained they want everybody to be smoke-free. He's not guaranteed employment. And their response was simple. The cost of healthcare is getting too expensive, and if he wants to ruin his life, we shouldn't have to pay for it. Case dismissed. That simple. Recently, there was a waitress at a restaurant in New York City who was terminated from her job because she refused to take the vaccine. That's a private employment. Your employer could require you to take the vaccine, absolutely. Now, those are private occupations. For example, could major airlines like Delta, United, Southwest, JetBlue, all the other ones, require their flight attendants, their cabin crew, their pilots to take a vaccine? It's a private company, so the answer is yes. Now, in those situations, the bigger the company you get, the more you have to deal with, you deal with unions. So that's a possibility too.
Because basically you're being terminated for something you do in private.
Well, but the thing is, if your employer is paying for your health insurance, that's where they're able to come in and say, if we're paying for your health insurance, we want you to take this vaccine, just like you need to get a physical.
Right. Because you increase the risk in which the premium you're supposed to pay would be increased because of your lifestyle.
Exactly, yes. Based on your lifestyle, your premiums will go up. For example, someone who's a smoker, someone who's overweight, and someone who is over the age of 50 is going to have a much higher premium if they get health insurance at that age. Some people have so many pre-existing conditions, health insurance companies won't even touch them because they said it's too expensive to cover.
Frankly, in the Philippines, if you belong to certain professions like policemen, and in my case, a lawyer, you may be uninsurable in some cases.
Really? I was fortunate to get private health insurance almost 10 years ago, so I'm already in the system, thankfully. but I got it early on. So yes, they could terminate you. Private employers could. Now, what about if you're a government employee? Well, that's a different situation. Could the government require you to do that? And I still think it's possible, but you'd have to that's even more tricky. For example, there was a survey taken. Only 40% of New York City firefighters from the FDNY would say we're going to take the vaccine. Now, would the city then dismiss 60% of their firefighters if they don't take the vaccine? Well, they could, but that's pretty dumb if they do that. Would you dismiss half of your police force if you don't take the vaccine? You could, but like I said, that's pretty dumb. Would you dismiss half of your corrections officers, half of your city bus drivers, your sanitation workers? Would you do that? If there's too high of a numbers who refuse to take it, if you dismiss your city employees, you're not going to have a city. You'll have no one to run the city. So we got to be very careful when government jobs saying, hey, look, if you want to work for us, you got to take a vaccine. Because if people don't show up to work, you don't have a government to run. I mean, it's a little more tricky there when you
that's for the already employed, those already in the workforce, right?
Yes, exactly.
Right. But if you're talking about new hires, can you make that a condition to employment?
I don't see why not. Yeah, you can do that. Absolutely. Yes, they could. They would still require, because yes, very possible. Very possible. You need to be vaccinated against COVID
before being hired, or else you won't get hired. That won't
get hired. Yeah.
That won't run against any kind of civil liberty issue, because basically, for example, if you're not hired because you are of gender or sexual preferences or race, you'll have a problem. That's discrimination.
Well, that's the state cannot discriminate based on there's a 14th Amendment guarantee to do against discrimination in these matters.
Right,
okay?
right.
So, but the fact is, choosing to get a vaccine, what is it? Look, you have 5 categories where neither the state, local, or federal government can discriminate. Okay, race, alienage, nationality, gender, legitimacy.
Yes.
Choosing to get not vaccinated is not a suspect class. So it's your choice whether you decide to get vaccinated. So if you choose not to, let me give you another scenario.
Okay.
I think it was 2 years ago. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is the former White House press secretary. She was the daughter of Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas. She was heckled in a restaurant as the White House press secretary. The restaurant threw her out. Does she have a claim for discrimination? No, because they were discriminating her. She led discrimination and said, "But that's your political views. That's not a suspect class. Your political views are not suspect class. So choosing to get vaccinated is not a suspect class. It's your choice. So no, if you choose not to get vaccinated, a person would have a very, very hard time. I don't see how you can even make a claim I've been discriminated against if I choose not to take a vaccine."
Okay.
Yes.
So we're there. We're already about vaccination. If you are part of a union, there's no protection even if you're part of a union.
Well, the unions would protect you. No, the unions protect. The unions could protect you if they choose. Look, when you deal with unions, especially huge airlines, for example, airlines are unionized. Okay, the flight attendants are unionized. The pilots are unionized. The baggage handlers are unionized. The check-in counters are unionized. You have to bargain with the unions. So if the unions say, "Okay, we're okay with vaccinations," then you're going to do it because you have your unions to work with. So no. If the unions say we're going to agree to vaccinations, then you're going to have to do it. Otherwise, you can't work. You just can't work for that. You can't be a part of that union. And if some companies, for example, say you have to, if you leave the union, you don't have. There are some companies that say, and if you are not a member of this union, you cannot work for this company. Now, there are some companies where you don't have to be a member of the union, but if you're a member of the union, your health insurance is covered. Your pension is covered. So you get that protection through a union. So the question is, are you willing to drop your union membership if you can if you choose not to get vaccinated. That's something that people have to gamble with. That's their, this is their personal choices in life.
Right.
They have to make that call.
Let's go to immigration. If you plan to go abroad, plan to go to the United States.
Yes.
Will the consulates require you to present vaccination or negative tests prior to issuance of visa?
No, and I think that would be, if that was the case, there would have to be a new regulation through the State Department. And like I said before, that would be subject to intense judicial scrutiny. So before that regulation would come into effect, it'd be killed. So no, I don't see that's going to happen, because that's more of a CDC issue and not a State Department issue. But like I said before, when you're applying for an immigrant visa, you have to undergo a medical evaluation. It's possible that the CDC can list COVID vaccinations as part of the medical evaluation, but there is no reason why they would require proof of a vaccination for the issuance of a non-immigrant visa.
Hey, if it's not a requirement, but will the evaluating officer have discretion? It's not in the rules, but in their evaluation, that can be a factor. Is that a fair fair comment or something?
Absolutely. For an example, when you're applying for a non-immigrant visa, there's the doctrine of consular discretion. A consular officer can refuse a visa because they're having a bad hair day. There's no reason why, if they don't need a reason to refuse you. So if they suspect this person didn't have a COVID vaccine, they don't need a reason to say, I'm not giving you the visa. The reason why I'm not giving you a visa is because the rationale for the ruling that they use is because I said so, and that's it.
Okay.
Challenge.
So they're not gonna drop that particular reason for the refusal. They may use it, but they're not gonna say it.
It's because I said so, and I don't need a reason because I said so. It's a no because I said so, because here this is not a democracy, this is a dictatorship, and because I said so, you're not getting this visa. Reapply. That's it. So that could happen, yes. But do I think it's going to happen? In that situation, they would have to see if they did that, if they required questions regarding COVID. The first thing that would happen, at least for visitor visas, or at least for all visas, you would have to first update something called either a DS-160, which is an online application for a non-immigrant visa, or a DS-260, which is an online application for an immigrant visa. And you'd have to they'd have to ask specific questions regarding COVID. Were you infected with COVID? Did you take a COVID vaccine? And that would be subject to discrimination. That could be subject to, because that's a regulation being imposed by the State Department.
Right. No, basically what I'm trying to pinpoint is, if you got a consular interview,
yes,
if that topic comes out, can you refuse to answer it?
You can refuse to answer, just like they can refuse the visa. Yes. Yes.
So if you're asked whether you're vaccinated, you better be saying yes, and with documentation.
You should just say yes or no and be honest. Don't lie. Yeah. But yes, the consular officers, here's, for example, a situation right now, one out of many. Okay. For people, for example, a lot of my clients choose to get married in Hong Kong because it's administratively less burdensome than going through a lot of documentation here. So if you have somebody who is applying for a tourist visa, and they ask you, why did you get married in Hong Kong? And someone says, well, because there's divorce in Hong Kong. They can just, that's a fair question to ask.
Okay.
So when you're applying for a non-immigrant visa, any question is fair. Yes, fair game. Would they go that far? It's possible, but it is a fair game. It's open-ended. As long as it's not, nasty and discriminatory, then you really don't have grounds to complain to an officer if they believe it was a fair question.
Let's make it. What's the best course if it's an issue of COVID and you want to travel to the United States? Would you recommend that they take the vaccine or?
Well, look, right now it's very, very, it's a very gray area.
Yeah.
Right now it's gray. Right now I can't say yes or no because we don't have answers.
Yes.
I will say that without the vaccine, if you don't take a vaccine eventually, I feel that a lot of people who don't take a vaccine may just be shut out of society. I mean, for example, what I'm thinking about this, and this is a thing that I mentioned to you earlier. It's highly unlikely, and I don't think it would happen because it wouldn't stand judicial scrutiny, for the U.S. to pass a law either through executive order, through regulation, or through Congress that would require people to show proof of a vaccine, at least for a large number of incoming travelers for non-immigrants. Immigrants, you can do that to the CDC because it's immigrant visa. They're going permanently. But here's something that could happen. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I've become a very avid reader since January, reading about at least sometimes 3 to 4 books a month. I'm currently reading a book about the biography of Henry Kissinger. I would say it's by Walter Isaacson, the former editor of Time magazine. I wouldn't say it's a pro-Kissinger, it's an anti-Kissinger, but it almost like if you wouldn't know him better, you'd almost think Kissinger had the lifestyle of J. Edgar Hoover. I mean, and he's 97 years young. He's 97 years young, still alive. Yeah. Okay. So actually his name was Heinz. He was born Heinz, not Henry. Okay. Kissinger did a lot of engaged in a lot of covert work, even back in his war days.
Yeah, he was sketchy. Sketchy figure.
When he was in World War II before he went to Harvard, he was in World War II. He was serving World War II. But going back, Kissinger has always been a very covert person. So even when he was in the army, and then when he got out of the army, and then when he would join Nixon's White House, I mean, he did a lot of covert work. Getting through. How did he get China's attention? He got it through Pakistan. How did he get through Cambodia to the South Vietnamese? So what I'm thinking is a possibility too, and this is only hypothetical, is the U.S. could eventually flex their diplomatic muscles and telling countries and saying, hey, if they are coming into us, please make sure they're vaccinated. This is your policy. So it'd be like the Philippines BI saying, we're requiring our own citizens to show proof of a vaccine before you board the plane to the U.S. That's something they could do.
So basically, they're going to reverse the obligation. The origin country or the country of origin will be the one imposing the regulations
on their own
before they can even apply or
leave the country. Yes, that's a possibility, and they can do that through their diplomatic muscles. They can say it wouldn't be through executive order. It'd all be through diplomatic channels saying, look, you need U.S. military aid. Give us something in return.
It's like the wink and the nod. Yeah,
Exactly. And that's something that could withstand scrutiny because it's all through the State Department. It's all
nothing's written. There's no memorandum.
There will be memos written that will be classified up until it's declassified, and eventually it'll be in the same exhibit next to J. Edgar Hoover. One of these
kind of like Abu Ghraib. I don't know where was that. The one that where the U.S. diplomat was held hostage.
Ambassador Stevens in Libya.
Libya. the Clinton Watergate.
Kind of like that. Yeah, kind of like that. It would eventually be declassified, but that's a possibility there. Yes, I don't see that becoming. That is a very possibility to say, hey, look, why don't we have their own countries impose a rule, and we're going to flex our muscles to try to get them to do this. That's a real possibility too. I wouldn't count that.
They could make that a condition for aid.
Well, look, I mean, Darwin, let's take a look at this of why I think it could happen. At least here, okay?
Yeah.
Before COVID, I was flying to Vietnam every week. Okay. Hopefully, I'll get back soon. Okay. Every time I leave, I took the SEPAC flight before I moved to the PAL flight, and before almost every flight, I would see people being questioned by POEA.
Okay.
Okay. That's a possibility. Off-boarding passengers because they think they're going to work. So they do it here for a reason because they want to make sure their own citizens aren't going to be exploited.
Yes.
Even with a valid visa. Okay. So that happens. That happens here. I've seen it happen many, many times. People are saying, no, we don't think you're going to work. We don't think you're going there to visit. You're going there to meet somebody you never met. We don't want you leaving. End of story. You can't leave. The foreign national can leave. You can't leave. That's a possibility. It's not impossible for the country, for specific countries to say, if you want to leave, Look, Australia is going to be requiring that.
Yes.
That's something. They're going. I talked to a colleague this morning in Australia. They're going to do that. If any Australian wants to leave or enter, you're not leaving without a vaccine. So that's a real possibility that countries will impose their own rules internally. So
By the way, the visa allocations, have they changed since the change of administration?
It's hard. Well, here it's horrible, Darwin. I mean, what happened was. What happened was last year there were executive orders which put a suspension
Yes.
on the issuance of certain categories.
Yes. Okay.
However, because the embassy remains on a skeletal workforce, it's unlikely of how those categories would even be processed, even if they weren't under a suspension. Because even till today, there was a limited workforce in the consular section.
Yes.
Even now, that I can't get a lot of my clients interviewed under those categories because there's just no availability of officers. So it's unlikely here, at least, that would have made much of a difference because there just was no officers adjudicating. And today, it's still extremely limited. So it's bad, just because the manpower is not there still.
By the way, just to recap, para ho sa mga nakikinig sa amin, for those listening in this program, my guest is Mr. Ryan Barshop. He is a immigration lawyer, and his email is flashed here. info@interlinepartners.com. So if you have any queries or you want to explore the possibility of the services of his company, please send him an email so we can you will be entertained for your queries and questions. Okay, so anyway,
you entertain a lot better than I do.
they can answer. He's an expert, believe me. He's a very good.
How long we known each other for? How many years?
Huh?
How many years we known each other? How many years?
6-7 years, I think.
At least. Long time.
At least 7 years, yeah.
Long time.
I was fatter then. I was bigger then. No.
Remember how fat I was?
Anyway,
Live, Darwin. We're healthier now.
we're healthier now. Wait, all the stress eating gone.
Yes. And if if my coach is watching, if CK you're watching, if any of my running team is watching, good job today in the heat at 5:30 a.m. this morning. That was hard in this Wednesday humidity. But guess what? I think we slayed it well. So good job on those threshold paces today.
Anyway, I'd like to greet the hosts of Pugad Bloggers who are not here tonight. Doc Ethel Pineda, our mutual friend, Atty. Tom Berenguer, Francis Abraham, Mark Lopez, Professor Van Ibiernes, and of course your office mate and friend, Maricar Serrano.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's listening right now. She's watching right now. Yeah. Hello. Then we have our watchers, those who stay tuned at the program. We have Gia Aris, Julia Alquino, Yotsutsuji, yeah, probably from Japan. Rim Mancha, good evening to you, Rim. Beng Arnicilia Yanguas, Ebenezer Codillo, Linda Masagka from Parañaque. Okay, guys, anybody, if you want to throw a question here, just state it in the Facebook page feed for as long as the program is still live, and maybe we can answer your questions here, no? What else? How about expats here in the Philippines? Do you have a pulse on what they think or are staying here?
I'm an expat, and I've been registered for 2 cities for the vaccine. I'm waiting to be called.
Okay, that's good.
Well, I'm waiting in line. I don't have any. I checked with 2 different cities, and my number is not called because I don't have any comorbidities. So my recommendation is
penalty for being healthy.
Yeah, that's one of the downsides of especially being a long distance runner. You know, it takes a certain type of psychopath to get up at 3 a.m. on a Sunday to run 21 kilometers.
It's okay if you're a psychopath. We're
still friends.
We can understand each other.
You can understand, yeah. Well, I mean, with expats like myself, and this has been a challenge, is we had to decide very quickly. We had like minutes to decide, what do we do when the pandemic hit? Do we stay here or leave? And we had to think critically. It's like, if we leave, what are the odds of coming back in? So that's the reason why I went from jet setting every week to being grounded. Now, granted, I think I made a great decision by staying here because work has been busy. And had I left, I probably wouldn't be. I'd still be out right now. So we got to be
Right.
So as expats, we don't have a luxury of coming in and out. So I just said, look, the best thing we can do now is remain here, tough it up, and hopefully by Christmas we can get out. But it's just everybody's in the same boat. I mean,
more or less, yeah.
I've got a ton of clients who contact us weekly and said, do you have any updates? When I can come in, I say, I'll know when I know, you'll know. Right now, we don't know. We're waiting like everybody else, and it depends on science. Will they open up? Now, I hope by Christmas it's possible. It was hard last year not to go to New York, but it was better I stayed here. It's better I stay here and get things done than go away. So a lot of expats are in the same situation. Where do we go? Do we stay here or leave? And we decided that, many of us decided, as hard as it is, it's better that we stay here, because if we leave, it can make things very bad to get back in. So we just couldn't gamble.
I
would just say register with your LGU for your vaccine.
All right, so that's the message to the expat community. If any of you are listening right now, you get to the best vaccine is the one in your body. So if you can get it, get it.
Get the first one available. The reason why I'm messaging because expats, we're not going to look. I have no proof behind this, but I feel that Philippines is one country that will mandate expats with a vaccine.
Okay.
Many countries in Thailand is saying they're going to do it. Vietnam absolutely will require it. Cambodia will. Singapore will. Malaysia will. Pretty much most countries in ASEAN are going to say, if you want to come in and you're not a citizen, you're going to have to get a vaccine. So if you don't get a vaccine, is that going to limit your mobility? Absolutely. Yes, I do see many countries here requiring non-citizens to present proof of a vaccine before you can be allowed to enter. That's a I don't see how that would any way around it. That's a real possibility.
Shout out to a certain Sally Bayo. Happy birthday today from the UK. Happy birthday, Sally. And coincidentally, my guest here had his birthday just last week.
Last week. 42 years young, Darwin.
Huh?
42 years young.
42 years young.
Yeah.
And looking great.
Feeling great. Looking good, Billy Ray.
Of course.
You didn't give me a punchline. It's feeling good, Lewis.
Yeah, feeling good, Lewis. Yeah. Switch trading places.
Trading places. Hey, I pity the fool who didn't grow up in the 80s.
What I was watching in the 80s is more like Weird Science and what else?
Anthony Michael Hall.
Anthony Michael Hall.
I think one was that was I flying PAL from New York to Manila and they showed Weird Science.
I just can't forget Kelly DeBrock. I mean, before she married Steven Seagal.
Who? Katie? Who?
Kelly LeBrock.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Yes. Or Kelly McGillis.
Yeah, I mean, Kelly McGillis, oh my God. I mean, Tom
Have you
Cruise
seen what she looks like today?
Yeah.
Talk about what Yasmin Bleeth looks like from Baywatch. I don't know what happened. But that pinup I had in my room of Yasmin Bleeth would cry. The pinup would cry today. The pinup would cry. I mean, she was gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And she took a wrong turn, and now it's like horrible. No, she looks horrible. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. She looks horrible. Yasmin. They just, I don't know.
Also, Neth Rivera from Japan. Yon. So anyway, I'd like to take the opportunity to also greet my family, my wife Wilma, my two kids Grayson and Sophia, and my mom Wilma in Davao City, and everybody, my co-workers in the office. Do you have anybody you'd like to greet, Ryan?
Everybody, who watches me, my clients, running team, friends, family here in New York. Thanks for watching.
Right. Final word. We're already time check 7:51. So what do you want as a message to our listeners?
I would say we're all in this together. We've been in this for well over a year. We're gonna have to just tough it up. There are certain things that I know we didn't. This was all we all caught. We were all sidetracked by this. We got sideswiped. We didn't expect this to happen. Whoever thought that a virus originating in China would affect everybody? Would affect.
So you think it would be advisable to make travel plans for 2021 or just postpone everything for 2022?
I think it's possible. Yes. I think if that makes you happy, yes, I think you should make travel plans. I think you should. Yes, I think if that's what you like. I mean, I haven't booked my flights for the holidays yet, but I'm prepared to do so. Worst case, you just get a refund. But mind you, PAL could take a while to give you that refund. I'm still fighting with them for a ticket that was canceled in December.
Do you see the things improving by, say, last quarter of this year?
It all depends on our vaccine rates. Can we pick it up? We got to get the vaccine rates. I know we're trying, but we got to put the pedal to the metal. We've got to get it running. This is critical because if we're going to hit herd immunity, we got to push hard. And if we don't push hard, it's not going to work. This is the cooperation of the national government, the LGUs. They got to work together and coordinate this because we're all in their hands. So we got to work together. I think yes, if we can speed up on the gas, yes, we can see we can have a much better Christmas this year. But are things going to turn back instantly? No, but I do think it's possible if we really speed up. By the end of the year, we're going to have a much better holiday season. Yes, absolutely.
So thank you, Ryan, for guesting tonight. You've been very, very informative and very, very helpful to our listeners on this issue of COVID passports.
Yes.
Hopefully, this will any information our listeners can act and decide accordingly. For the listeners of DZRJ 810 AM, the next program should be Oras ng Himala, followed by Kakampi with Bernard Tan. Stay tuned here, watch and share dito po sa DZRJ 810 AM Facebook page and sa radyo din po. We are also live simultaneously channel 224 on cable channel. We are also on Radio Garden app. We are likewise on YouTube. Like and subscribe po to the Facebook, to the YouTube channel na nakakroll po dito. This is in behalf of my other co-hosts, this is Atty. Darwin Cañete thanking you for listening and giving your time tonight. We will be back tomorrow with another host, I think, until Friday, every weekday, 7 to 8 p.m. here at DZRJ 810 AM. So thank you and good evening. Good evening, Ryan.
Thank you, Darwin.
Thank you. Are we okay?
I'm waiting.
Yeah. Wait, I think we're okay na.
We're okay? Log off?
I don't know. Tech, are we, off? Okay, sige, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Ryan. I'll see you.
I'll pull you.
Vloggers, Pugad Vloggers. Ang kurap titirisin, salot sa bayan wawalisin, walang sasantuhin. Ang saya-saya, nakakabaliw, kasama natin ang tropang Pugad Vloggers.